I still can't explain what happened that night. I've tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, a trick of the mind, but deep down, I know the truth. And the truth is much worse than anything my mind could have conjured up. It started on an ordinary Friday evening. My parents had gone out of town for the weekend, leaving me home alone. I wasn't scared. I'd stayed alone plenty of times before. I had my snacks, my laptop, and a couple of horror movies lined up, thinking nothing was scarier than the ones I chose. Turns out, I was wrong. The first few hours were uneventful. The house was quiet, except for the occasional creak from the old wooden floors. It was a small 2-story home, nothing fancy, but just isolated enough to make a night alone feel a little eerie. Around 10 p.m., I started hearing noises. At first, I brushed them off. Houses settle, right? Pipes groan, wind blows against windows. But then I heard something that made my stomach drop. Footsteps. Not the soft creaks of a house adjusting, but deliberate measured steps. Slow, heavy, coming from upstairs. I paused my movie and strained to listen, my heart thudding in my chest. The steps continued. Someone or something was moving around up there. I grabbed my phone and texted my parents. No response. I told myself it was nothing, just paranoia. But then I heard a door upstairs creak open. I turned off the TV, plunging the room into silence. The only sound was my ragged breathing and the faint rustling above. I stood up, my legs trembling beneath me, and grabbed the closest thing to a weapon, a kitchen knife. My phone was clutched in my other hand, fingers shaking as I hovered over the call button. I was about to dial 911 when I heard something that made me freeze. A voice. Not a whisper, not a murmur, but a voice. It was low and guttural, like someone speaking through gritted teeth. It said just one thing. Come upstairs. I felt every hair on my body rise. My throat went dry. I was alone. I was supposed to be alone. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The silence stretched on, suffocating me. And then, as if it knew I wasn't coming, the voice spoke again. Come upstairs. I need to show you something. Nope. Absolutely not. My body finally caught up to my fear, and I bolted toward the front door. My hands fumbled with the lock, heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. And then, bang! Something crashed upstairs. A door slammed shut, shaking the walls. I let out a strangled scream and yanked the door open. But just as I was about to run out, I heard it. A deep, ragged breath, right behind me. I whipped around expecting, well, I don't know what I expected. A person? A shadow? But there was nothing, just the empty hallway stretching toward the staircase. But I felt it, that suffocating presence. It was there, watching me. I didn't wait. I ran out into the night, barefoot and shaking, sprinting down the street to my neighbor's house. I pounded on their door like a lunatic until they finally opened up. I told them someone was in my house, that I heard them, that they spoke to me. The police arrived in minutes. They searched the entire house, top to bottom. And you know what they found? Nothing. No signs of forced entry, no footprints, no open windows. Nothing. But I know what I heard. I know what I felt. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed at my neighbor's house, refusing to step foot back inside. When my parents came home, I told them everything. They laughed it off, saying I must have been dreaming. But I wasn't. I know I wasn't. The worst part? A few weeks later, I was going through some old family albums, and I found a picture of our house from decades ago. In the corner of the photo, barely visible, was a figure standing in the upstairs window, a dark silhouette, watching. I don't stay home alone anymore, ever, because something was in that house with me that night, and I don't think it ever left.
Story number 2.
I've always been skeptical about ghosts and the supernatural. That was until the night I found myself trapped in my own home, terrorized by something I couldn't see, something that wanted me to know it was there. It happened last winter. I had just moved back home after college, my parents away on a weekend trip, leaving me to watch the house. It was an old place, built in the 1940s, with creaky wooden floors and walls that seemed to whisper when the wind blew. The first night alone was uneventful. I stayed up late watching TV, snuggled under a blanket with my dog Max, curled up beside me. He was a good dog, never barked unless he had a reason to. That's why, when he suddenly lifted his head around 2 a.m. and stared toward the dark hallway leading to the bedrooms, I felt an icy chill crawl up my spine. I muted the TV. "What is it, buddy?" Max didn't growl. He didn't move. He just sat there, ears perked, eyes locked on the hallway. I peered into the darkness, my heart hammering. I told myself it was nothing, just the old house settling. But then I heard it. A faint tap, tap, like fingernails drumming against wood. I swallowed hard. It was coming from the end of the hallway, near my parents' room. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, shining it down the hall. The light barely reached the far end, but I could see the bedroom doors, closed, just as I had left them. And then the sound stopped. Max finally relaxed, his body going limp as he rested his head back down. I let out a shaky breath. Probably just my imagination, I told myself. Or maybe a pipe shifting in the walls. I turned the TV back on, pushing the fear down. But I didn't sleep well that night. The next day was quiet. I went about my business, cooking, reading, watching movies. By the time night fell, I had convinced myself I had overreacted. Then, at exactly 2 a.m., Max did it again. His head shot up, his ears twitching, his eyes staring down the hallway. I sat up, my heart already racing. "Not again," I whispered. And then, from the darkness, tap, tap, tap. Only this time, it was louder. Max let out a low, uneasy whine. I grabbed my phone, shaking as I turned on the flashlight and aimed it down the hall. The doors were still closed. Nothing there, but my gut told me something was very, very wrong. And then, right before I turned the light off, I saw it. A shadow. It was faint, barely distinguishable from the darkness, but I saw it. A tall, thin figure standing at the very end of the hallway. I gasped and dropped the phone. The flashlight landed face up, casting eerie, moving shadows across the ceiling. My breath came in ragged bursts as I scrambled to grab it, my fingers slipping in my panic. Max was growling now, a deep, guttural sound I had never heard from him before. I finally grabbed the phone and aimed the light back down the hall. Nothing. No shadow, no figure. I was shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I wanted to call someone, anyone. But what would I say? That I saw a shadow? That my dog was scared? No one would believe me. I told myself I was imagining things, that my tired mind was playing tricks on me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I didn't sleep that night. The next day I tried to push the fear aside, telling myself I had been half asleep, dreaming with my eyes open. But I couldn't ignore the feeling of unease that lingered. That night, I decided to sleep with all the lights on. If there was something in the house, I wanted to see it. I settled on the couch with Max, scrolling through my phone to distract myself. Hours passed. Nothing happened. And then, at exactly 2 a.m., Max's head snapped up. My body went cold. I gripped my phone so tightly, my fingers ached. I didn't want to look, but I did. And this time, I wasn't imagining things. There was someone standing in the hallway. Not a shadow, not a trick of the light. A person. Tall, thin, motionless. They didn't move. They didn't breathe. They just stood there. A strangled noise escaped my throat. My vision blurred with panic. Max launched off the couch, barking furiously. But the figure didn't flinch. It didn't react at all. I fumbled for the lamp beside me and switched it on. The moment the light flooded the room, the figure was gone. Max kept barking, his eyes wild, staring at the spot where it had been. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. My mind was screaming at me to get out, but my body was frozen with terror. I forced myself to move. I grabbed my keys, yanked on my shoes, and ran out of the house with Max right behind me. I drove to my friend's place across town and pounded on the door until they let me in. I was shaking, barely able to get the words out. "There's someone in my house." The police searched the entire house. They found no signs of forced entry, no footprints, no evidence that anyone had been inside. But I know what I saw. I know what Max saw. I refused to go back alone. My parents cut their trip short and came home the next day. They laughed it off, said I must have been dreaming. But I wasn't. The next night, my dad woke up to a sound in the hallway. Tap, tap. When he got up to check, he swore he saw a shadow move just for a split second. After that, they stopped laughing. A few weeks later, we had a priest bless the house. My parents never talked about it again. And me? I moved out as soon as I could. But sometimes, late at night, I still wake up to the sound of tapping. And I wonder, did it follow me?
Story number 3.
I still don't know how I survived that night. Maybe I wasn't supposed to. Maybe it let me go. It was a Friday night and I was home alone. My parents were at a weekend retreat, and my little brother was staying with our aunt. I was 17 at the time, and I relished the freedom. I ordered pizza, threw on a movie, and curled up in the living room. The house was quiet. Too quiet. At first, I ignored the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. I was just on edge from the horror movie, right? But then I heard it, a knock. Not on the front door, not on the windows. It came from inside the house. I froze, muting the TV. I strained my ears, waiting. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe the house was just settling. Then it happened again. Knock, knock, knock. A slow, deliberate tapping coming from upstairs. I grabbed my phone, heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't about to check it out like some idiot in a horror movie. Instead, I texted my best friend, Jake. Me, dude, I think someone's in my house. What teeth? Call the cops! I'm probably just freaking out. Hold on. I held my breath, listening. Silence. Then, knock, knock. It was louder this time, more urgent, and it was coming from my bedroom. I stood up so fast I nearly tripped over the coffee table. My first instinct was to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating. Then my phone buzzed. Jake again. Get out of the house! I didn't need to be told twice. I bolted for the front door, but before I could reach it, slam! A door upstairs slammed shut so hard the whole house seemed to shake. I let out a strangled scream, my body running on pure adrenaline as I yanked the front door open and ran outside. I didn't stop until I was halfway down the street, standing under a flickering streetlight. My breath came in sharp gasps, my vision blurry with panic. My phone buzzed again. Jake, I'm coming over. Stay outside. I wanted to tell him not to bother, that I wasn't setting foot back in that house tonight. But then something else caught my eye. The upstairs window. My bedroom window. There was someone standing there, a dark silhouette, motionless, watching me. I felt my stomach drop. The figure didn't move. It didn't react to me staring at it. It just stood there. I turned and ran to the neighbor's house, pounding on the door until Mr. Harrison, a grumpy old man in his 60s, answered. He took one look at my panicked face and let me in. Jake arrived 10 minutes later, breathless and wild-eyed. Dude, what the hell happened? I told them everything. The knocking, the slamming door, the shadow in my window. Jake and Mr. Harrison exchanged uneasy glances. We should check it out, Jake said. I shook my head violently. No way. I'm not going back in there. But they insisted. Mr. Harrison grabbed a baseball bat and Jake had a pocket knife. Together they entered the house while I waited outside, my heart hammering in my chest. Minutes passed. Then Jake came running out, his face pale. There's no one in there. I blinked. What? Mr. Harrison came out a moment later, shaking his head. We checked everywhere. Windows locked. No signs of forced entry. I couldn't believe it. But I saw someone in my window. Jake swallowed hard. Dude, the weird thing is, your bedroom door was open when we went upstairs, but we both heard it slam shut earlier, right? A cold dread settled over me. I ended up staying at Jake's place that night. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that dark figure in the window, watching me. The next morning, I forced myself to go back. The house felt off. I couldn't explain it. Just walking inside made my skin crawl. I went upstairs, my legs like lead. My bedroom door was closed. I hesitated, then slowly pushed it open. Everything looked normal. My bed, my desk, my closet door slightly ajar, and then I saw it. The closet mirror. There was a smudge on the glass, like someone had pressed their hand against it, a wet handprint. My blood ran cold. I backed away, my breath coming in short gasps. The air in the room felt heavy, charged with something unseen. And then I heard it, right behind me, a whisper. So close it felt like breath against my ear. Get out! I ran. I never stayed home alone again after that. My parents thought I had just scared myself silly, but I knew better. I started digging into the history of the house. I found an old article about a man who had lived there in the 1950s. He was a recluse, never seen much by the neighbors. One day he just disappeared. The police found no signs of struggle, no sign of forced entry, but they did find something strange. His bedroom closet, locked from the inside. Inside, there were deep scratch marks along the walls as if someone had been trapped there. I don't know if he ever left. I don't know if it was him watching me from the window that night. All I know is I moved out as soon as I could, and I never, ever sleep with my closet door open, because sometimes in the middle of the night, I still hear the knocking.